how to use the VLOOKUP function in Excel to pull data from multiple tables. We are going to look up different ranges at once and then return the corresponding value. Because in this Excel workbook, I have different tabs here at the bottom, different sheets. And for sure, you can also download this Excel file. Let's say in this first sheet where I have the sales report, I have an item. It can be a product, a plan, or a service. So let's say basic calculator. This is our first item. I need to return its price, but we have three different tables where we can look up for the price of this item. We have the first sheet that is products, and then the second one that is the services, and the third one that is the plans. So how my VLOOKUP formula is going to know in which table it needs to look up for the price of this corresponding value, this corresponding item. So this is exactly what we are going to do in this video. Basically, we are going to couple two different functions in Excel. We are going to do a nested formula when we need to use a formula within another formula. And in this case, we are going to use VLOOKUP coupled with IFERROR. So in this column to the right, I want to do a VLOOKUP using those different tables that I have. Let's start with the equals, because all the formulas in Excel need to start with equal to Excel understand what we are going to do here is a calculation, a formula, a function, equals. And then let's start with the traditional VLOOKUP formula. And then we can be more specific later on. So equals VLOOKUP, double click on the formula to select it, 1, 2, and pay attention because the structure of a formula needs to contain equals, the name of the function, and also a open parenthesis. Equals VLOOKUP open parenthesis. And then we can continue with the first parameter or with the first argument, let's say. That is the lookup value. And in this case, the lookup value is the item, which I have here in this first row, basic calculator, but it could be anything else, doesn't matter. So I'm looking for this first item, comma. Let's say, what is the table array I want to look for? In this case, I don't want to specify, I don't want to use multiple tables right now. I only want to use one single range, one single table. So let's randomly pick a table. Let's say table array. As a table array, I want to use the second sheet, products. Maybe we have some items that are going to match with our criteria. Maybe we will not have, and so forth. But let's stick with only the products table first. As the column that we need to select first, it needs to be the column B, because this is where we have our products. So column B. Click on the column B to select everything. And always the VLOOKUP formula uses the first column as the criteria range, the range where it's going to look for the matches. So first column B, click, hold, and drag all the way to the right until you hit the column you want to return as a result. Like I want to do here, the sales price. So from column B to G. That's it. Now let's hit comma so Excel can move on to the next argument, and it's the column index number. As the column index number, because I select all those columns from B to G, B is going to be my first selected column. So it's the number 1, the first one. And then we have the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth. I want to use the number 6 because I want to return the sales price. And the sales price is in the sixth row, sixth column, right? So number 6, comma. And as the lookup value, I want to have a exact match. And why does exact match means, and why not approximate match? Because I want to look for exactly the item that I have. Let's say I'm looking for banana. So Excel needs to return the according value for banana. It's not going to return apple, for example. So exact match. Double click in this option, 1, 2, and then we can close parentheses and hit enter. Excel for sure is going to return to the first result, 27.9, And if we click in this small square that is the fill handle, hold and drag downwards, Excel is going to return multiple results. The second row, the fourth, but we have a problem with the third row. But why is that? Because maybe this item that we have is not in the first table, but maybe in the second, or maybe in the third, or maybe in other tables if you have more tables to use. So how can we solve this problem? Let's say VLOOKUP did its job. It could return the matches, the matching values, the corresponding values for our items. But if we have a error, like myself here, hash n/a, it's a error in Excel, what we can do is we can use a different formula to help the VLOOKUP take other tables into the calculation. And for this case, we can use the IFERROR function. How can we do that? Let's go straight to the first formula, double click in the first cell, 1, 2, to open up. And immediately after the equal sign, before the VLOOKUP, immediately after the equals, you can type IFERROR. This is the formula we are looking for. Double click in the formula, 1, 2, and make sure we have equals, IFERROR, and a open parenthesis. And within the open parenthesis, we're going to have the entire VLOOKUP formula. But why is that? Because the VLOOKUP now is part of the IFERROR formula. And the VLOOKUP means the value. It's the value. It's the first argument of the IFERROR. However, if we have an error in the VLOOKUP, like we have on the third row, on the fifth row, instead of return an error like we have, we can return another VLOOKUP formula, but this time using a different range. So this is the magic about the IFERROR, because if we have an error, instead of use the first VLOOKUP, we can use another one, and then another one, and then another one, and that's it. We can stack VLOOKUP on top of each other, and then we can look up for many different tables that we have. If we can't find an item on the first VLOOKUP, on the first range, we can move on to the second range, to the third, to the fourth, and etc. So let's go to the last parenthesis, and then comma, value if error. In this case, value if error, I want to use again another VLOOKUP. And remember, guys, the terminology I said before, when we have a formula within another formula like we have here, we are combining multiple formulas. It's called nested formula or nested function. Let me double click within this VLOOKUP 1, 2 to open up. Again, we're going to do everything basically the same. The only thing that's going to change is the table array. So let's go faster this time. So lookup value is going to be our item, comma. However, the table array can be either the second or the third table, because we already used the first one. So let me go to the second so we can maintain the order. Let me first select the column A this time. Click, hold, and drag all the way to the right, maybe to column F, where I have sales price. However, if you select multiple columns to the right, it's not going to give you an error, okay? The important thing is select from the first column where you have your criteria, your matches, all the way to the right. That's it. Comma. And as my column index number, as my first column, I have the service. It's not, of course, the service is the first important column because it's where I have the items. So I can check whether or not the item corresponds to the row we are current at. So, but however, it's not the service I want to return. The service is just my criteria. I want to return the information in the second row, in the second column. No, it's not in the third, it's not in the fourth, it's not in the fifth. It's exactly in the sixth column, sale price. So let me return here the number 6 and then comma, and we can move on to the exact match. Double click, 1, 2. However, this time pay attention because we need to be mindful. Close one parenthesis and close one more parenthesis. But why should we close the parenthesis twice? Because the first parenthesis is for the VLOOKUP and the second one is for the IFERROR function. So hit enter. Okay, it's not going to change anything here on the first row. However, if we click, hold, and drag the formula again, using the fill handle, as you guys can notice, 3, 2, 1, okay, we have more correct results. We have more numbers. Of course, we have still some errors, maybe because those errors are products we don't have neither in the first nor in the second table, but we have then in the third range, in the third table. So this is exactly what we are going to do here. We need to couple one more VLOOKUP here within this formula. And to make sure it's possible, again, we are going to use the same logic over and over. And let's say you have a fourth table, a fifth table, and etc. Multiple different tables, several tables. You can continue to build up the formula like that with the same structure. Immediately after the equal sign, not before, but immediately after, you can open again another if error. Double click to select it, 1, 2, and be mindful to have this structure properly set up. Equals, if error, open parentheses, or opened rounded brackets, right? We have everything here, all the values, and after the last parenthesis, we can again insert a comma and the value if error, or in other words, if the first VLOOKUP returns a error, it's going to do the second VLOOKUP. However, if everything we have within this if error return a errors, it's going to do a third VLOOKUP. So this third VLOOKUP is going to solve those errors right here. And we can move to the third range, to the third table. So let me do one more time here, the VLOOKUP, 1, 2, to select. As the lookup value, we need to look for the item. So click on it, comma. The table array, finally, we can move on to the last sheet, plans. And I want to start with the plan, column D. Click, hold, and drag, heads on to the right, like that. D, E, and F, comma. Now let me click on the formula bar because it's easier to see the arguments. Column index number. Because we start in the column D, column D becomes our first column. So first, second, and third. In this case, we need to return the third column, the plan price. Let me insert the number 3, comma, and again, I want to do a exact match. 1, 2, and we need to close twice the parentheses. Why is that? Because the first one is for the VLOOKUP and the second one is for the if error. Hit enter. And guys, now finally, if we, for the last time, click, hold, and drag the formula all the way down, all the way through all the rows we have, all the way to the bottom, we have no errors anymore. So this is basically how we can build up a VLOOKUP formula in Excel to pull information from different tables. And for sure, if you have multiple tables, more tables than I'm using here, different ranges, you can continue to apply the same methodology. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you have any questions or any suggestions to the next videos, let me know, comment down below, and I see you in the next one.